Doctors once told women that reading too many books could overheat their brain and make them infertile. They shaved a woman's entire head to try to cure her epilepsy. They handed out heroin as children's cough medicine and called it safe. For hundreds of years, the smartest doctors on Earth were completely, terrifyingly wrong. And today, I'm showing you 49 of the most insane things doctors actually believed and actually did to real patients. And honestly, number 34 will make you afraid of soda. Hit subscribe, because after this list, you'll never trust an old family remedy again. 1. A tired farmer walked into a doctor's office complaining of nothing more than a headache and a bit of stomach trouble. The doctor immediately produced a blade and calmly announced that a full quart of blood needed to leave his body right away. The farmer watched in stunned silence as the doctor filled bowl after bowl, believing every drop removed pulled sickness out with it. By the time the bleeding stopped, the poor man could barely stand, yet the doctor smiled proudly and called it a complete success. Family members waiting outside simply nodded along, trusting that medicine knew best. 2. An elderly woman living near a crowded river town grew terrified whenever a foul smell drifted through her window at night. Doctors of the era assured her that the smell itself was the true enemy, insisting that invisible bad air carried disease into the lungs of anyone who breathed it. Windows were sealed shut and perfumed cloths were pressed against faces, while the real danger sat in the drinking water nobody thought to question. Years later, when cholera swept through the town, killing dozens, she still blamed the smell, convinced that fresh air alone had failed to save her neighbors. 3. A young husband quietly seeking treatment for a private illness was handed a small dose of mercury by his trusted family doctor and told it would fix everything. He returned every week for more convinced. His health was slowly improving under professional care. His wife noticed his hands trembling and his teeth loosening, but the doctor insisted this was simply the medicine working its way through his system. Relatives praised the treatment as modern and effective, while the poison quietly spread deeper with every visit. Nobody questioned why the cure seemed to be killing him slower than the disease ever could. 4. A married woman complaining of anxiety and fatigue was brought before a specialist who confidently explained that her womb had wandered loose somewhere inside her body. Her husband nodded seriously, as if this made perfect medical sense and not like something out of a horror story. Doctors prescribed strange remedies meant to coax the organ back into its rightful place, while she sat bewildered through each appointment. Female relatives whispered that this diagnosis explained practically every mood swing in the family for generations. Nobody in the room paused to ask how exactly an organ was supposed to go for a walk. 5. A worried mother pacing the nursery at midnight finally reached for a cough remedy, proudly advertised by a respected drug company as perfectly safe for children. She spooned the sweet syrup into her coughing toddler, completely unaware the active ingredient was heroin. The child stopped coughing almost instantly and slept so soundly the mother assumed she had found a miracle cure. She recommended it warmly to every neighbor with a sick child at the next gathering. Nobody suspected the quiet little bottle sitting on the nursery shelf was quite possibly the most dangerous thing in the entire house. 6. Grandmothers rarely panic over garden vegetables, but one shrieked as if her teenage grandson had bitten into a live grenade instead of a ripe tomato. Doctors of the era swore the fruit turned deadly the instant its acid touched a pewter plate. Entire neighborhoods let tomato vines rot untouched, while children were yanked away screaming if they even looked at one too long. The boy kept sneaking bites behind the barn, convinced he was living dangerously. Decades later, people would casually pile tomatoes on every burger, completely unaware they were once treated like edible dynamite. 7. Exhausted from endless factory shifts, one worker stumbled onto what he thought was the greatest energy drink ever invented, and he was not entirely wrong about the energy part. The bottled water glowed faintly and was quietly radioactive, yet doctors praised it as pure liquid vigor for tired bodies. He downed it every morning, bragging to coworkers that he felt unstoppable and mysteriously warm on the inside. His wife gifted cases of it to relatives, thinking she had found the ultimate health hack. Nobody clapped louder for progress than the man who was essentially microwaving himself one refreshing sip at a time. 8. Fashion mattered more than comfort to one city mother who laced her toddler into shoes so tight the child could barely wiggle a toe and called it excellent parenting. Doctors insisted soft, comfortable shoes would leave children weak and floppy for life. The little girl cried every single morning while her mother stayed proud and unbothered, convinced she was raising a future athlete. Relatives at dinner parties admired the shoes like tiny torture devices dressed up as fashion statements. Nobody noticed the child limping quietly by evening, because apparently limping was just what strong ankles looked like back then. 9. Sadness had worn one man down so completely that his family brought him to a doctor who had apparently decided the fastest route to mental peace was through the eye socket. Without flinching, the doctor slid a thin ice pick in, like he was checking for ripe watermelons, and called it groundbreaking treatment. The family sat in the waiting room, nodding along as if this were completely normal Tuesday medicine. Afterward, the man seemed calmer, mainly because he seemed like an entirely different person altogether. Hospitals nationwide adopted the method proudly, unaware they were basically lobotomizing people with kitchen tools. 10. Quiet reading in his bedroom earned one teenage boy a lecture so serious you would think he had been caught robbing a bank. His father genuinely believed a certain private habit would leave him blind, insane, and dead before 30. Every blink and blurry glance sent the poor kid into a spiral of panic, thinking his doom had finally arrived. His mother prayed over dinner like he had contracted a terminal illness overnight. Generations repeated the warning with a straight face, never once considering that maybe glasses were simply invented for a reason. 11. Reaching for things with his left hand sent one newborn's grandmother into a full-blown crisis about his future criminal record. Doctors agreed, insisting left-handed children needed urgent correcting before they turned into unpredictable menaces to society. Relatives tied his hand down at every meal, while he screamed like he was being personally betrayed by his own family. Teachers later smacked his hand at school whenever it drifted back to its natural side like clockwork. Decades later, he simply grew up to be a perfectly normal adult who happened to write with his left hand. 12. Desperate to shed baby weight, one new mother heard about a revolutionary diet pill everyone in her social circle was suddenly raving about. She had absolutely no idea the tiny capsule contained live tapeworm eggs designed to grow a permanent houseguest inside her stomach. Friends complimented her shrinking waistline while she smiled proudly, never imagining she now had roommates. She even recommended the pill to her own sister, calling it the easiest diet of her life. The horrifying truth only surfaced once doctors realized the weight loss had a pulse of its own. 13. Burning with fever on a stormy night, one child was rushed to a local healer by his panicked aunt, who trusted this method completely. The healer wrapped a live spider inside a soft raisin and told the boy to swallow it whole, like a tiny, horrifying vitamin. The aunt whispered prayers while the boy gagged like his life depended on keeping a straight face. By morning, the fever broke entirely on its own, yet the family celebrated the spider like it had personally performed surgery. Nobody questioned why a healthy immune system got zero credit that day. 14. Bright red hair apparently made one teenage boy medically terrifying to an entire operating room full of surgeons. Doctors genuinely believed redheads carried some kind of fiery blood that made anesthesia unpredictable and unreliable. Nurses hesitated nervously before every procedure, treating him like a walking science experiment rather than a nervous patient. His mother sat outside, convinced her son's hair color alone might somehow complicate his surgery. He recovered perfectly fine like everyone else in the building, yet the rumor about redheads followed him for years afterward at every single hospital visit he ever made. 15. A hearty lunch followed immediately by a lake swim landed one teenage boy in serious trouble with his overly cautious uncle. Doctors of the era swore that swimming right after eating could trigger fatal cramps strong enough to drown a person instantly. The uncle forced him to sit motionless on the shore for a full hour, glaring at anyone who dared enter the water too soon. Cousins nearby whispered nervously, as if watching a countdown to disaster rather than a normal summer afternoon. The boy eventually swam just fine, proving the family had spent an entire hour fearing digestion itself. 16. Sudden seizures in one young woman convinced her worried family that the fastest cure available was a complete head shave performed without hesitation. Doctors insisted removing every strand of hair could somehow calm the electrical storms happening inside her brain. Her mother wept while watching locks fall to the floor, believing this drastic step might finally save her daughter. Neighbors visited afterward, offering sympathetic glances as if baldness itself were part of the treatment plan. The seizures continued exactly as before, proving hairstyles had absolutely nothing to do with the condition doctors were desperately trying to fix. 17. Pale skin became such an obsession for one fashionable young woman that she began secretly eating small amounts of arsenic to achieve it. Doctors and beauty experts of the era praised the ghostly complexion as the very picture of elegance and refined health. Her sisters begged for the same secret routine, admiring how radiant and fragile she appeared at every social gathering. Nobody noticed the slow toll it was quietly taking beneath the flawless powdered surface everyone envied. She was widely considered the most beautiful woman in town, right up until the poison finally caught up with her. 18. Endless hours spent glued to the family television set convinced one worried father that his children were absorbing dangerous radiation directly into their bodies. Doctors at the time genuinely warned that television sets emitted harmful rays capable of making young viewers seriously ill. He rationed screen time like it was hazardous waste, while his kids begged for just one more cartoon. Neighbors compared notes, nervously wondering if their own children were glowing faintly from overexposure. Decades later, families would leave televisions running constantly, proving the original panic had been aimed at the wrong invention entirely. 19. Blinding headaches convinced one desperate patient that something evil was trapped inside his skull and needed to escape immediately. A healer confidently drilled a small hole directly into his head, insisting this would release the troublesome spirits causing all his pain. Family members held him steady throughout the procedure, trusting completely that relief was only one hole away. Word spread through the village that the treatment had worked wonders for headaches everywhere. Nobody considered that surviving the drilling itself was already a small miracle, regardless of any spirits involved. 20. One birthday party ended in complete chaos the moment children finished their cake, and doctors present blamed sugar alone for turning them into tiny hurricanes. Parents nodded, seriously convinced sweets alone could transform calm kids into permanently hyperactive troublemakers overnight. Grandmothers banned dessert entirely at future gatherings, certain they were preventing future criminals from forming at the table. Meanwhile, the same children calmed down naturally within the hour, just like children always eventually do. Nobody stopped to consider that maybe an entire afternoon of games and excitement played a much bigger role than frosting ever could. 21. A simple weekly bath became a source of genuine dread for one elderly woman convinced that water itself was an open invitation for disease. Doctors of the era warned that bathing opened the pores and let sickness pour straight into the body. She scrubbed herself with dry cloths, instead proudly telling her grandchildren she was protecting her health the smart way. Neighbors admired her discipline, never once questioning why she smelled faintly of lavender and desperation. Modern hygiene would later prove the exact opposite true, leaving her entire cautious routine looking more dangerous than the baths she so carefully avoided. 22. A young woman preparing for her wedding was laced into a corset so tight her aunt nearly needed smelling salts just watching the process. Doctors insisted the rigid design kept internal organs properly aligned and perfectly healthy despite the obvious struggle to breathe. She fainted twice during the ceremony while relatives whispered proudly about her elegant tiny waistline. Her mother considered the fainting spells a small price to pay for such fashionable posture. Nobody questioned why perfect organ alignment seemed to require nearly cutting off her air supply the entire afternoon. 23. A bright young woman devoted to books was pulled aside by her worried father who feared her brain was quite literally overheating from too much reading. Doctors of the era warned that intense study could damage a woman's fertility and overall health permanently. He limited her library visits, insisting he was protecting her future family rather than her education. She continued reading secretly by candlelight, refusing to let her mind cool down as instructed. She later had a large, healthy family, proving her brain had apparently survived the dangerous crime of finishing too many novels. 24. A restless infant crying through the night sent one new mother straight into panic the moment his gums began to swell. Doctors of the era blamed teething for nearly every infant illness, including fevers, convulsions, and even death itself. She rubbed his gums nervously, convinced the emerging teeth alone were the true danger, rather than any underlying illness. Relatives nodded gravely, sharing stories of babies lost to nothing more than a few stubborn teeth. Actual infections and diseases continued quietly unnoticed, while an entire generation of parents feared nothing more than a baby simply growing up. 25. A young boy who accidentally touched a hot stove was rushed screaming to his grandmother, who immediately reached for the butter dish instead of water. Doctors of the era genuinely recommended slathering butter directly onto burns to seal in the healing process. She spread it thickly across his reddened skin, convinced she was providing immediate relief and comfort. Neighbors praised her quick thinking, completely unaware the butter was actually trapping heat deeper into the wound. Modern doctors would later be horrified, learning an entire era had been buttering burns like breakfast toast. 26. A stomachache-complaining teenager was handed a spoonful of turpentine by his no-nonsense uncle, who swore by it as the ultimate cure for intestinal worms. Doctors of the time genuinely recommended the harsh solvent as a legitimate home remedy for stomach troubles. The boy grimaced through the burning taste, while his uncle insisted the worse it tasted, the better it worked. Cousins nearby watched nervously, half expecting smoke to come out of his ears at any moment. He survived just fine, proving mostly that stubbornness and questionable medicine somehow worked together that particular afternoon. 27. A confident young man interviewing for a respectable job once had his skull carefully measured by an examiner who claimed the bumps revealed his true intelligence and character. Doctors and scientists of the era took phrenology completely seriously, treating head shape like a window into someone's entire personality. Employers reviewed the measurements solemnly before deciding whether he seemed trustworthy enough for the position. His mother proudly framed the skull chart like an academic achievement worth celebrating. Nobody at the time considered that maybe an actual conversation might reveal more about a person than a bump above his ear. 28. A pregnant woman who accidentally witnessed a frightening accident spent the rest of her pregnancy terrified over what the shock might do to her unborn baby. Doctors of the era warned that strong fright or emotion could physically mark or deform a growing child before birth. Her husband kept her sheltered from anything upsetting, convinced one bad scare could permanently alter their baby's appearance. Relatives whispered nervously, comparing every birthmark on newborns to some story of maternal fright. The healthy baby arrived completely unaffected, proving emotions alone had never actually held that kind of power. 29. A quiet elderly neighbor known for occasional strange behavior was widely blamed by the town whenever a full moon appeared overhead. Doctors and townsfolk alike genuinely believed moonlight could temporarily unbalance a person's mind, causing sudden fits of madness. Families locked their doors a little tighter during full moons, convinced danger lurked brighter under extra moonlight. Children were warned to stay indoors, as if the moon itself might reach down and grab them. The odd behavior continued exactly the same, regardless of the moon's phase, proving the glowing rock overhead had been unfairly blamed the entire time. 30. A middle-aged uncle struggling with chronic back pain and low energy was thrilled to discover an electric belt advertised as a miracle cure for weakness. He strapped it around his waist every single evening, feeling a faint tingling that convinced him powerful healing was underway. His wife purchased an extra one, hoping it might help with his complaints about everything else too. Friends at gatherings admired his confidence in modern technology, completely unaware he was essentially wearing a mild electrical nuisance. His back pain continued unchanged, proving the only thing truly electrified that night was his imagination. 31. Summer heat had barely started when one anxious mother decided her son eating ice cream too quickly could send a fatal chill straight through his entire body. Doctors of the era genuinely warned that rapid ice cream consumption in extreme heat could shock the system dangerously. She rationed each spoonful slowly, while he groaned impatiently, watching his treat melt in the sun. Neighbors nodded in agreement, sharing similar warnings passed down through their own worried mothers. He survived the ice cream just fine, proving the only real danger that afternoon was watching dessert melt away, one cautious spoonful at a time. 32. Preparing for her very first train journey left one nervous young woman terrified after her father warned that the shocking speed could permanently damage her body and mind. Doctors of the era genuinely believed traveling too fast could rattle organs loose or overload the human brain entirely. She gripped her seat the entire ride, certain her body might simply give out somewhere along the tracks. Fellow passengers exchanged nervous glances, as if bracing for some kind of physical collapse at any moment. She arrived perfectly fine, proving the train had done nothing except get her there faster than her father's imagination ever could. 33. Stiff, aching joints convinced one elderly grandfather that the answer to his arthritis was simply carrying a raw potato in his coat pocket at all times. Doctors and neighbors alike swore by the strange remedy, insisting the potato slowly drew the pain right out of his hands. He replaced the potato faithfully every week, treating it like a prescription rather than a vegetable. Grandchildren giggled whenever it rolled out during family dinners, though he defended it with complete seriousness every single time. His arthritis continued exactly as before, proving the potato had mostly just been keeping his pocket company. 34. Rough seas during a long voyage sent one queasy traveler straight to the ship's doctor, begging for anything to settle his nausea. The doctor confidently handed him a bottle of fizzy soda water, insisting it was a genuine medical cure for seasickness and upset stomachs. He sipped it nervously through the entire storm, convinced the bubbles alone were somehow stabilizing his insides. Fellow passengers requested the same bottled remedy, watching him with cautious hope. The nausea eventually passed naturally once the water calmed, proving the soda had mostly just been expensive fizzy water the whole time. 35. Cycling through town brought one determined young woman nothing but joy until her aunt warned harshly that too much bicycle riding could permanently disfigure her face forever. Doctors of the era genuinely claimed constant pedaling caused a strained, flushed expression they seriously called bicycle face. Her aunt begged her to slow down, convinced her niece's pretty features were at serious risk with every ride. She kept cycling anyway, enjoying the wind and freedom far too much to stop over such nonsense. Her face remained completely normal for decades, proving bicycles had never once been capable of the disaster everyone feared. 36. Rolling into town with wagons full of bottles, one traveling salesman promised every aching farmer that his snake fat could cure joint pain unlike anything modern medicine had produced. Crowds gathered eagerly, handing over their savings, convinced the greasy bottled cure was the miracle they had been waiting for. An old uncle in the crowd swore his knees already felt looser after just one dose. Neighbors lined up for extra bottles, certain word would spread about this incredible discovery. The salesman vanished from town days later, proving the only thing truly slippery about the whole affair had been him. 37. Shivering under a thin blanket with a rising fever gave one grandmother the idea to pile her grandson under even heavier quilts to sweat the sickness right out of him. Doctors of the era genuinely believed a hard, intense sweat could burn a fever completely out of the body. He lay drenched and exhausted while she checked on him every hour, convinced progress was clearly being made. Relatives brought even more blankets, certain that more heat surely meant faster healing. The fever eventually broke on its own, proving the boy had mostly just survived an accidental sauna that entire feverish night. 38. Clever, glossy advertisements convinced one modern housewife that a certain harsh disinfectant marketed for feminine hygiene was exactly what her daily routine needed. Doctors and companies alike promoted the product directly to women for years without a hint of hesitation. She trusted the polished magazine pages completely, never questioning why a household cleaner was suddenly being sold in such delicate packaging. Friends discussed the product openly at gatherings, treating it like any other trusted beauty essential. Decades later, the entire industry would quietly distance itself from ever recommending it in the first place. 39. Applying for a demanding labor job left one hardworking young man quietly rejected the moment doctors noticed his feet lacked a proper arch. Employers of the era genuinely believed flat feet indicated poor physical stamina and even questionable mental toughness. His father argued on his behalf, insisting his son had never once complained about sore feet in his life. The examining doctor remained firm, treating the flat arch like an obvious red flag rather than a harmless trait. He eventually found work elsewhere, proving flat feet had never actually slowed him down for a single day of honest labor. 40. Coughing fits through the night convinced one worried family that their sick relative needed a room sealed completely airtight to trap in the healing heat. Doctors of the era genuinely believed pneumonia could be cured by keeping every window and crack shut tight against fresh air. His sisters stuffed towels under doors, certain they were locking in the recovery rather than the illness itself. Relatives visiting felt dizzy within minutes, though nobody dared mention the stuffy air might be part of the problem. He eventually recovered slowly, proving fresh air had been the missing ingredient the entire family had accidentally sealed out. 41. Expecting her first child left one pregnant young woman ordered by her doctor into months of complete bed rest despite feeling perfectly healthy the entire time. Doctors of the era genuinely believed rest alone prevented complications, regardless of how the pregnancy was actually progressing. Her mother fluffed pillows, constantly convinced lying still was the safest possible choice for the baby. Friends visited regularly, marveling at her patience through such an extended and unnecessary confinement. She delivered a perfectly healthy baby, proving months of stillness had mostly just given her plenty of time to memorize her bedroom ceiling. 42. Rolling up his sleeve nervously, one young boy received his required vaccination, while his grandmother watched with quiet dread about what the small scar might actually cost him. Doctors and elders of the era genuinely believed the mark left behind slowly drained a person's vital energy over time. She fed him extra portions at every meal, convinced he needed to replenish whatever strength the scar was secretly stealing. Neighbors compared their own fading scars, swapping theories about tiredness and low spirits. He grew into a strong, healthy adult, proving the tiny mark on his arm had never once been quietly robbing him of anything. 43. Desperate for relief from a painful growth, one struggling farmer was told by his uncle that touching the hand of an executed man could cure tumors, goiters, and growths completely. Doctors and townsfolk alike genuinely believed such contact carried a strange healing power passed on at the moment of death. He waited nervously in line at a public execution, convinced this bizarre opportunity might finally solve his problem. Neighbors nearby did the same, clutching hopeful expressions despite the grim setting around them. The growth remained completely unchanged afterward, proving the only thing accomplished that day was an extremely unpleasant afternoon out. 44. Thinning hair sent one balding uncle searching for solutions, until a barber confidently recommended rubbing onion juice vigorously into his scalp every single night. Doctors of the era genuinely supported the smelly remedy, insisting it could stimulate regrowth better than anything else available. His wife complained about the overwhelming smell filling their bedroom every evening without fail. Friends teased him mercilessly, though he pressed on, convinced thick hair was just weeks away. His scalp remained exactly as bald as before, proving onions were apparently far better suited for cooking than for growing hair. 45. Wheezing through another rough night, one asthmatic teenager was surprised when his doctor recommended smoking specially prepared tobacco to calm his frayed lungs and nerves. Doctors of the era genuinely believed the smoke could soothe breathing troubles rather than worsen them entirely. His mother purchased the recommended cigarettes herself, trusting the prescription completely without a second thought. Relatives visiting found nothing strange about a teenager smoking for his health at every family gathering. His breathing barely improved at all, proving the treatment had mostly just added smoke to an already struggling set of lungs. 46. Curious young partygoers gathered one evening for what they called a frolic, where chloroform and ether were passed around purely for entertainment and laughter. Doctors and hosts alike genuinely believed the substances carried no real health risk when used only for a bit of recreational fun. One young woman giggled uncontrollably, while friends cheered her on, completely unaware of any danger involved. Word spread quickly, and more gatherings followed, with everyone eager to try the strange, giddy sensation themselves. Nobody at the time considered that inhaling medical anesthesia for laughs might not be the safest party trick available. 47. Struggling with a relentless cough, one small child was carried by his worried mother straight to the family barn, where a healer insisted on something rather unusual. Doctors and neighbors alike genuinely believed inhaling a horse's breath could cure whooping cough completely. The child was held close to the stall while the animal breathed calmly nearby, completely unaware of its new medical role. Relatives watched, hopefully convinced they were witnessing a proven folk remedy in action. The cough eventually faded on its own, proving the horse had mostly just provided company during an otherwise ordinary illness. 48. Struggling with confusion and distress, one patient was brought by his brother to an asylum, where doctors proudly demonstrated their newest treatment involving a rapidly spinning chair. Doctors of the era genuinely believed the dizzying spin could rebalance a troubled mind back into proper order. He was strapped in firmly while the chair whirled faster, leaving him thoroughly nauseated rather than calm. Staff members observed closely, taking notes, as if witnessing genuine progress unfold before them. He left feeling worse than before, proving the only thing truly rebalanced that day was his stomach. 49. Suffering from a long list of stubborn ailments, One elderly woman was advised by a traveling healer to try drinking small amounts of her own urine every morning. Doctors and folk healers alike genuinely believed the practice could cure everything from fatigue to skin troubles entirely. Her daughter watched in horrified silence, while her mother sipped it down without so much as a flinch. Neighbors whispered about the strange routine, though several quietly admitted trying it themselves out of sheer desperation. Her health remained exactly the same, proving the only thing truly cured that morning was any remaining sense of dignity. And there you have it. 49 times doctors and healers looked at basic biology and said absolutely not. We are drilling a hole in it. Instead, from tapeworms as diet plans to potatoes as medicine, humanity has always been confident and almost never correct. If any of these made you laugh out loud or say that cannot be real, do us a favor and smash that like button. Subscribe to BrainFumble and turn on notifications so you never miss the next batch of history's worst ideas. Share this with a friend who needs a laugh today. Now drop a comment and tell us which one of these 49 was the most unhinged.